Ahoy hoy! Welcome back to my channel. Today I figure I will do something that I've been mentioning for like the last few months, especially if you've been on my channel for a while, and that is to talk about the worst day of my life. There are a few disclaimers I want to make though. If you don't like to hear about talk of blood, needles, death, menstruation, female reproductive health, and more importantly, miscarriage, I advise you to stop this video unless you're curious like a cat. If you continue, you go at your own risk. But yeah, you have those warnings. And then to make another disclaimer, I'm doing this for two reasons. One is to give awareness, because there were some things that I didn't know before this happened. And two is to close a dark chapter in my life, finally. After 10 years. And I feel like talking about it will help me. I know some people will be like, oh, you should not talk about this, Cindy. You should keep it quiet. Why? I don't see how miscarrying is different than losing somebody you love, like a relative or a friend. There's a lot of stigma around miscarriages for some strange reason. And I get it though. A lot of women are ashamed. They feel guilt. But the thing is, the medical community doesn't even know why the majority of miscarriages happen. It's in a category of shit happens. And it's not your fault. And not to mention, it would help some people feel less isolated. Especially if they're in a scenario similar to mine or almost identical to mine. Because there's something about having an extra issue with your miscarriage that makes you feel more isolated than normal. So I'm kind of hoping to alleviate that. But I get it if people don't want to talk about it, but I feel like sometimes it doesn't help to do that. I feel like knowledge is power, but then again, who am I to say that? I didn't tell my parents and my brother about it until 3 months later. I didn't tell my friend list on LiveJournal about it until 6 months later, and I didn't tell my Facebook friend list until 5 years later. So I've gone through that. But for me, it was also because, and I get why a lot of people don't talk about it. It's more than just the stigma. It's also because you feel like you're reliving it again. And if it's extra traumatic, like it was in my situation, you definitely don't want to talk about it for a while until years go by. So I just thought I'd put all that out there. So my fun worst day. That sounds like a weird thing to say. Okay, let me try that again. The worst day of my life started this day 10 years ago. But ironically, it actually started 2 months before this happened, because that will factor into this just a little bit. Not as a cause, but it's a factor. So this was in October 2nd, 2010. And I had to get a procedure on my cervix because I had normal cell growth. An ordinary pap smear, found that I had positive results about abnormal cell growth activity. And after a few months of double checking to make sure it was still there, I was finally scheduled to get surgery to remove it. And luckily for me, it was benign. But still, I'm glad to get rid of it. And 2 weeks later, my cycle was due, but it never came. And I thought, oh, well, the procedure I had caused me not to have it because of the stress and stuff. So then a month later, in mid-November of that year, I was still late. And this time I suspected, gee, I might be pregnant. But how? Yes, I know sex causes pregnancy, but, and this is where I'm naive when it comes to female reproductive anatomy. I forgot, or I was never taught because, and this is why I stress sex education in school when you get older. While my mom did a good job providing me information about contraception and sex in general and STDs, although the school taught me STDs too, since STDs were their own chapter and not related to sex ed. I never really learned about the female reproductive system. So for some strange reason, I thought because I had surgery on my cervix, it would hinder me from getting pregnant or would cause a miscarriage. Which doesn't make sense when you know female reproductive anatomy, because the cervix would be like here and uterus is up there, somewhere around there. But let me tell you something, that me being naive about that will play a role in later. I'm going to say that line a lot, by the way. For not just that, for other things too. But anyway. So, I did suspect I was pregnant, despite me being naive about the reproductive female system. And I decided to wait to get pregnancy tests at the end of November, the last week in November, in fact. Because I just wanted to give myself more time just to make sure that it wasn't stress from the surgery causing it to be extended or whatnot. But then again, I did have a golden rule that if I was 6 weeks late, that's when I would get pregnancy test. But I had other suspicions too. Like, other than being late, I had nausea and I was tired, and I developed an aversion to egg rolls and ranch dressing. Now, with the egg rolls, I didn't know that at the time, but I realized that I probably had an aversion to that, even though I passed it off as, oh, I ate too much of it, so I'm sick of it. So those were my indicators that I suspected I was pregnant. Well, so the last weekend in November comes, and I start my cycle, or what I thought was a cycle. It started, ironically enough, on my daughter's birthday, 10 years ago, and it lasted until December 1st. Now, this was a weird cycle in the sense that I didn't have pain and I didn't have cramps on the first 2 days. I had it on the last 2 days instead. But I didn't freak out about it because I had a similar period in July of 2010. And by the by, I've only had that kind of period twice. In July of 2010 and at the end of November, beginning of December in 2010. Both in 2010. So at this point, I've been trying to get pregnant for a year and a half. And although I kind of suspected I was pregnant in 2009, it was too early to know for sure. I was just a week late, and I was tired and nauseous in the beginning of it. But I didn't have any confirmation. It was just a suspicion. And I didn't think nothing of I didn't think nothing of July. Just that it was a weird period that I had. So, obviously, since I had this period, I didn't get a pregnancy test. So, when December 1st rolls around, it's the second day that I'm having cramps. And when I woke up, I was feeling crampy. I woke up early and said goodbye to my significant other who left for work, which I used to do all the time. And he used to wake up really early to go to his job, too. And so I would spend an hour online, like on Yahoo chat room, which shows how long this has been. And before I go back to sleep. And as I was chatting online and checking other places that I would frequent online, my cramps began to increase in pain. And they were getting really painful. And so I asked the room the question, mainly to the female chatters, if they ever had a procedure similar to mine before and they ever had painful cramps afterwards, if they had if it was the same thing for the first period after they had the procedure. And one of my friends replied that she did have a procedure, but that didn't happen, and I should go to the hospital. And I'm like, well, I'll take Tylenol first, and I'll try to sleep it off, and if it doesn't work, I'll go to the hospital then. And it's not because I don't like going to the doctors, it's just that I'd rather go to the doctors or the hospital if it's really, 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 really needed. And at that point, it wasn't really, 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 really needed yet. But it will be, trust me. So, I take a Tylenol, and that doesn't work. Unlike the time that I had the contractions during my labor with both my son and daughter, when it did work. And after a half hour, the cramps began to go to my back. And the next thing you know, I would have cramps in my back, and then they go to my front. And then they'll go back to my back, then they go to my front. And it happened every few minutes. And when I tried to lay down, it didn't work. So it would go away a little bit when I walked around. And ironically, this happened a lot too when I was in labor, like walking around helped me a little bit, but only to a point, and it definitely didn't when I was pregnant with my daughter, or expecting my daughter. So, at one point when I'm walking around, I feel something slip out of me. And I'm wearing a tampon, by the way, so I thought, oh, I need to change it. So I did, and I didn't think nothing of it. I went to the bathroom, and then I noticed the toilet bowl was bloody. Not like super duper bloody, but like it was tinted red. And it looked nearly like it did after my procedure 2 months prior. And I thought, something must be wrong with my cervix. And like a few minutes after I got off the toilet, it was like someone turned on the floodgates, and next thing you know, blood is literally running down my legs. And of course I started to freak out because this is not normal. It was like someone had stabbed me up there, and just to give you a comparison, if I can. It's probably not the best comparison in the world. So, I start freaking out. I called my significant other because 2 weeks before this happened, he told me if there was ever an emergency to have my neighbor take me to the hospital rather than wait for the ambulance to come and get me, because we lived out in the middle of nowhere. But the problem is I had a new phone and I didn't have their number on there anymore. So I had to call him to call then, because I was too afraid to walk up there, actually. So I tried to ring my significant other at his job, and another person answers and kept asking me if I wanted this person who had a nickname to my significant others that I wasn't aware of. And I said, yes. And if it's the wrong guy, I'll say who it was, who I need to talk to, and if it was the right person, I'll be happy. Luckily, he got the right person. And as soon as I heard my significant other's voice, I just lost it with hysterics and said, call our neighbors, I need to go to the hospital. And he said, okay, hung up and to call. Meanwhile, I'm like, I felt myself slap myself upside my head. I didn't actually do it, but I mentally did it. And it's like, why are you panicking? You know panicking is not going to help you. And I know this because I study disasters. I prefer to study natural disasters, but I've been to study a lot of disasters, which I've been doing since I was 14, which is amazing considering I don't have a job involving disasters. It was just an interest of mine, and still is. So because of my studying of disasters, I literally forced myself to calm down, and oh my God, this eerie calm settled over me that I never felt before. It was like someone numbed me from being hysterical, even though I still felt scared. So, and I did this because I was afraid that I was going to pass out if I didn't calm down. And if I did that, my neighbor would have a hard time getting into the house because the front door was still locked. And it was one of those locks where you do this to latch it, and it's hard to open the door after you do that. If you ever seen my video about paranormal activity in Sweden, I went around my old house to show where the paranormal activity was, and you can see how the door looked like. I'll try to link it at the end of this video. But anyway, I forced myself to calm down to prevent myself from passing out. And I got a call from my significant other saying my neighbor was coming over. And I got dressed. I made sure I wore black pants. I wish I wore a black sweater, but I wore a yellow shirt. And I took a towel because I already bled through a tampon and a pad. That's how much I was bleeding. And so he arrives, we leave. I sit on the towel in his car so I don't bleed over his car seat. And while I'm still scared about the blood loss, I'm not freaking out. But I keep feeling myself gush out every few minutes. The irony is, that I didn't feel pain anymore after I started bleeding out. That's really, really bright. Hold on. There we go. So, once I started bleeding out, I didn't feel pain anymore, which was weird. So, we get to the hospital around the same time my significant other does. And when I get into the ER, the towel's just soaked in blood, which my significant other pointed out to the receptionist, which had me go back in the ER quicker. The funny part of the whole entire thing is that despite my blood loss, I still had a normal blood pressure level. That was funny. Because I forced myself to calm down. I forgot what my pulse was, but they sent me to the same ward that I went to months ago when I had a normal cell growth that they wanted to double check on. Because they suspected it had something to do with my cervix, but they didn't know what. And they also suspected I might have been pregnant since I haven't had a cycle since September of that year. So, they get me to the room, ask me a bunch of questions. They hooked me up into an IV in this arm. And full of liquids, since I was losing liquids because I was bleeding out. And they wanted a urine sample. So we went to the bathroom, and midwife, the gynecologist, and me. Now, if you remember what I said in my last video involving my daughter's birth as well as my son, I said that in Sweden, sorry, I was just trying to see if it's light enough. Okay, go with that. That midwives are responsible for reproductive health in Sweden. And this goes from pap smears to actually delivering the babies. The only time a gynecologist or an obstetrician gets involved is if there's an emergency. In my case, it was an emergency. So a gynecologist was there as well as a nurse. So we went to the bathroom to get a urine sample, and this part is going to be absolutely disgusting. I'm putting that out right now. So you either skip ahead, or if you want to listen with morbid curiosity, feel free, but just know it's going to get disgusting in a bit. It wasn't disgusting before, but extra disgusting. You guys know how big urine cups are, right? How big urine sample cups are? Yeah. Now, I felt like I had to pee, but instead of urine coming into the sample cup, I literally filled it with blood. And on top of all that blood was a piece of tissue that was the size of a jellyfish head. And they knew something was extremely wrong if I was bleeding that much into a cup. So they took another sample, and this time they were able to get a sample, but it was saturated with blood. And as I was giving them the second sample, I heard the gynecologist talking on the phone that I would need an operation. And I knew that because the operation in Swedish is the same word as it is in English. And at this point, I'm getting scared. If I wasn't before, I was getting extra scared. So I returned to the bed. Again, I was able to walk there like I was able to walk to the bathroom before, despite the blood loss. and I felt lightheaded, and I threw up, but nothing came up. And they asked me, "Did you get that way because you saw the blood? Is it the needle that they started to insert me here, the second IV, to be attached to fluids, or is it both?" And I said both. So my bed was now surrounded by midwives and nurses, and they thought at first the reason why I was bleeding out was because I had a rare complication from the procedure I had 2 months ago, where it can make the smaller smaller blood vessels in my cervix weak, and they can actually break, causing me to bleed out. And so they thought that's what was the case at first. But then they did a pregnancy sample on the urine sample that I was able to produce, and I found out I was pregnant. Unfortunately, by that point, I already lost the pregnancy. I did get choked up. I didn't cry, though, because I knew that if I cried, I would become more dehydrated, despite being attached to 2 IV bags full of fluid. So that was hard to swallow, because as I said, I was trying to get pregnant for 18 months by this point. So, they said that I needed surgery to remove what was left of the fetus, because my body had a hard time removing it. And considering I told them that I thought I had a period on the 28th of November that year, they thought that during the process something went wrong, and my body just had trouble getting rid of the fetus. So basically I got a D&C. And for some strange reason, some people think this is automatically an abortion bed default, but it's actually the procedure to remove any fetal remains from the uterus, because if that remains, it gets infected, and that can become deadly for women. And this isn't just used in elective and therapeutical abortions. This is also happening in miscarriages that are known as incomplete miscarriages, where your body does not get rid of the fetus on its own. It needs help. And of course, I think it's safe to say that already my life was already threatened by all the blood loss. So they even did a scan, an ultrasound scan, using the vaginal probe, I think. Yeah, they did that. And but they didn't let me see the screen for obvious reasons. And then they asked me, "Have you eaten or drank anything lately?" I said, "Well, I haven't eaten since 8 o'clock the day before, because I don't eat breakfast. I don't usually feel hungry in the morning." And I drank in the morning to have that Tylenol to get rid of the pain. But I should have peed it out by then. But just in case, they gave me a catheter, which fucking hurts more than a pap smear, in my goddamn opinion. So other than doing all that, they also put a needle in here to do more testing. I don't know what that was for. Probably to check my hemoglobin or something. I lost count of how many needles they were putting in me. And by the by, I have a fear of needles. I usually look away when they put needles in me, but I have a fear of them. And plus, I get sick when I see a certain amount of blood. So I had to contend with those 2 things on top of the miscarriage and me bleeding out like there was no tomorrow. So they rushed me down to surgery. My significant other was able to be with me when they put me under. They put another needle right here to inject the oh no, or did they put it? I don't think they put anything in this arm. They inject me right here with the IV, where the IV for the fluids used to be, and they just injected the anesthesia there, and they said your arm could hurt, which it did. But then was it this arm? I think might have been this arm. But anyway, one of the nurses was starting to put a needle somewhere around here. I forgot where exactly. And I didn't know what that was for. But my significant other told her, wait till she's under first before you do that, because she doesn't like needles and stuff. And so she decided to wait until I was under before she do that. And then they put a mask over my mouth as I was going under it. And it took me 30 seconds to go under. Yeah, that's how much I wanted to go under. So I woke up, I wasn't in pain anymore. I wasn't bleeding out anymore. I was just really, really tired. They wheeled me to a recovery ward where I felt like I was peeing once every 30 minutes or so. I mean, I was peeing so much. And it was because of the fluids they gave me through the IVs. And then I was wheeled into a private room because they were going to hold me in. They were going to have me stay overnight originally. And I had some doctors and nurses come by and talk to me about what happened, which obviously was a miscarriage. And they suspected initially that I had an RH incompatibility because they checked the remains of the fetus and noticed that it had a different blood type than mine. And this part makes me confused to this day, but that they knew it wasn't my blood type only because I think I was, because I'm O negative. And when you have an O negative blood type, while you can donate to everybody, you cannot receive blood from everybody. You can only receive blood from O negative donors. And basically, your blood can only interact with O negative blood, basically, even when you're pregnant. And they suspected this is what caused me to bleed out because there was a mixing between the fetus's blood and my blood. But they weren't sure about the miscarriage, although they suspected it was RH incompatibility. So, just to be on the safe side, they gave me an RH gluten shot, which was a big-ass needle, by the way. I looked at it briefly, and it was big, and I'm like, oh, shit, that's going into me. And you know where it went? It went right here, somewhere around there. And I grasped the freaking bedpost with all my strength and stuff. Yeah, they did that in the private room. Thank my deities. So they thought that the fetus's blood type that was different from mine would cause me to bleed out, and they kind of suspected it caused an RH incompatibility. But when I had my son, it didn't turn out to be the case because my significant other is a negative blood type like I am, and so are our children. Both of our children are B negative, and my significant other is AB negative, and the negative factor should not be affecting me. But because I'm O negative, you never know. So I think they did that as a precautionary thing back then, but I didn't need that shot anymore, even after I had my children and stuff. So I got another prick on my finger. Actually, it was probably the first prick because I think they took blood from here the first time around when they did the hemoglobin test for some strange reason. But or that I don't remember it because I was trying so hard not to lose it at that point mentally. Like not have a ranting or anything, but I was trying hard not to pass out and not panic and all this other stuff. But when I first came in, or after the bathroom incident, as I call it, where I bled like crazy into that urine cup, they checked my hemoglobin, and I know the measurements are different between Sweden and the U.S. So in Sweden, it was 38 out of 100. Your hemoglobin's supposed to be 100, and mine was 38. In the States, if I got it right, a woman's hemoglobin is supposed to be between 12 to 15. And I forgot the measurement after that, but it was supposed to be between 12 and 15. I was 3.1, to give you guys an indicator. So yeah, I was in dire straits. So when they test my hemoglobin again, it's back to normal range. So I was able to actually be let go that day. I did have a meal first. I got lactose-free vegetable soup with some kind of crumble and lactose-free sauce. I wasn't in any more pain or anything. But of course, I was emotionally messed up. And tired still. We did go to McDonald's afterwards because McDonald's is loaded with sweet and I was craving it. probably because my blood sugar was so low. But then I found out a month later, after all this shit happened, so this was in January of 2011, I said to my significant other, because at the time I was writing my book Immortal Love, and I did a lot of research about blood loss because my protagonist in the novel does suffer blood loss too, and she needs a blood transfusion. And if I remember correctly, and I'm just remembering this from what I researched, if you have anything between, I think between 25 to 35% blood loss, a blood transfusion can happen, but it's not usually required. But if it's like 30% or more, it's definitely required. And I think I was about 30% or something, or bordering 30%. But I said to my significant other, I'm surprised I didn't have a blood transfusion despite all the blood loss I had. And he kind of answered kind of reluctantly. He's like, actually, you did have a blood transfusion. When? You had a blood transfusion while you were getting your surgery done. Oh my God. He's like, yeah. You lost so much blood, you were required to have a blood transfusion. So that made me realize just how dire it was. And not that it wasn't dire before that, but it made it more dire. Because when they put the needle right here that I saw in my arm when I woke up, because there was nothing attached to it, I wonder what was that for? And that's where they did the blood transfusion then. So, yeah. Afterwards, obviously I didn't talk about it much. Didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want to relive, especially the part where I was losing blood and all. Let alone having all needles go into me. And I think I counted 7 needles going into me. So, and seeing all that blood and stuff. But, it made me realize just how strong I was emotionally. Because when I started bleeding out, no one was home with me when that happened. And I didn't freak out or anything like that. And despite knowing that I had this risk hanging over my head each time I get pregnant, because I could bleed out again if I would have another miscarriage, if I would have an abortion, or after I give birth, that I could have this happen again to me, where I bleed out or something else happens because of my blood type. And luckily, nothing else has happened since then. When I was pregnant with the kids, my blood was monitored throughout the pregnancy, and it was checked again after I gave birth, to the point where my significant other's like, how can you be afraid of needles? You just gave birth, But they said too that the nurses, the doctors, and midwives tell me that usually a lot of women have miscarriages during the time where they thought they had their periods, and it made me think back to that time in July where I had a similar scenario almost, where I didn't feel pain the first 2 days and I felt pain only the last 2 days, which makes me think I miscarried then too. So, and then of course 2 years after I had this miscarriage, I miscarried my son's twin at 8 weeks. And yeah, I knew I was pregnant before that happened, and that wrecked me, but even though I did bleed a lot, I didn't bleed out, and I didn't have to be hospitalized for that, so that was in a way good, even though I lost my son's twin. So yeah, this is the worst day of my life 10 years ago. So I not only just lose a pregnancy, but I almost died too. So, from blood loss. So yeah, I'm hoping this gives you guys some insight. I hope if you ever had a similar situation like I did, I hope this makes you feel less isolated. So yeah. I don't want to say anything like liking this video because I don't want people to think, oh, I like this because of what happened. And I'm not going to think that. But it feels weird saying, if you like this video, hit like and stuff. So I don't know. If you're a woman, what's your experience with miscarriage? Only if you're willing to talk about it. You're not obligated to. Has there anyone out there ever been through something similar? If you're a midwife, doctor, or gynecologist, obstetrician, whatever, what's your opinions about this? Because I'm interested in your opinions. Because even after all these years, I'm still questioning some stuff, I don't know 100% why I miscarried. They suspect it might have been me being an O-negative blood type and seeing the baby as a threat because of the different blood types. And of course, when you have that, antibodies are formed and they do attack the fetus or the baby and stuff. But I don't know. So, yeah. Well, I will say, if you subscribe to this video, I'll be joyous. If you mention you're subscribing to me, I will subscribe to you back, even if you don't have any videos, as a thank you. And I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. And also, thank you for letting me talk about this.